Let me tell you about a little game called Hellescape. It's a vibrant RPG with real-time action elements and overall quirky sensibilities, the latter of which is sort of my bread and butter, so having discovered it through clips the creator posted online, it naturally piqued my interest. When it comes to cool-looking indie projects like these on the internet, they can sometimes be years out from getting to experience those sick gameplay clips firsthand, let alone a full release assuming development doesn't fizzle out. But Hellescape seemed different. The creator was planning on releasing a multi-hour demo for the game by the end of the year, and they did, after some minor delays, and I played it. Despite some rough patches and encountering a full-on game crash, Hellescape's demo presents a shockingly compelling package. Even with my personal inclinations, it can still be difficult for these story-driven indie RPGs' approach to character writing to fully resonate with me, but Hellescape establishes its world and cast in just the right way to hook me in. It's a hard thing to describe without actually experiencing something yourself. There's kind of this whole meta thing going on with the protagonist, where you're diegetically summoned in the game world to inhabit her body as a glowing star thing. In practice, essentially it evens the playing field on a narrative level. It also seems to enable non-violent seal actions for overcoming foes in battle. Said battles alternate between traditional turn-based action with shmup-inspired real-time barrages, while also incorporating WarioWare-esque minigames for its pacifist playstyle, which is what I personally went with out of habit. Even with the demo's 3-ish hour runtime, there's plenty of eccentric faces you'll meet along the way. From cats to bats to bills to caterpillars, you can get a decent sense for how this fantastical society operates outside of the main quest. Ilya, the queen of this land, is a persistent force in your journey well before facing her as the demo's final boss. She's painted as this suspicious figure that gets in your way as much as she seems to help, but I don't think I could have guessed her exact motivation for acting like that, in a good way. Nothing too deep, but it gets the gears turning a little. I really like Nine, the dog companion. They get a lot of good moments, they've got a silly design, and they may or may not be physiologically related to the demons coming from the titular place of Hell, like where the demon guy who taunts and tries to kill you at the start of the game is from. Speaking of, the opening area caught my eye with just how nice the pixel art is. You don't end up sticking around there for particularly long, leaving by way of a gigantic one-sided door, but it's a level of quality the demo maintains across its whole runtime. The character designs have such a distinctive charm to them, even for the one-off overworld NPCs. Traveling among the violet grass, with shades of pink cutting through the blades, spike puzzles strewn about to be solved, a quaint little bake sale near the halfway point, and the castle of the land's ruler looming off in the distance. It all feels so... Wait. Yeah, you know what this is about. Going into Hellescape, I was already aware of what was up, but for the uninitiated, this game's demo is heavily derivative of Toby Fox's Deltarune, particularly its first chapter. There's some other games and fanworks Hellescape pulls from, but it is absolutely drenched in the former. And I find the imitation of other games to be fascinating. Let's talk about that. Across any given medium, any form of human expression really, there's always going to be an amount of a person's lived experience extrapolated into a different form. You can't create without being able to pull from that which already exists. It's why the use of photo reference can be so imperative in art, for instance. One thing that translates to in the context of video games are genres, the particular design conventions and mechanics which comprise them. Fixed cinematic camera angles became the predominant design language of horror games, in part to Resident Evil. Plenty of open-world games have a cliff-face establishing shot moment because of Zelda. Many first-person shooters use a screen overlay to represent player health because of Call of Duty. I don't fucking play those games, etc. These are just a fraction of the most influential titles in the medium, for better or worse, even if they weren't necessarily the first to do it, which leads to those that follow in their footsteps shortly thereafter to be commonly derided as knockoffs. Doom wasn't even the first notable FPS, but because it left such a strong impression on those who played it, as well as the hardware restricting how 3D environments could be rendered at the time, it led to the coining of the Doom clone, ascribed to the surge of shooters that rode on the coattails of its success. Beyond companies that straight up licensed Doom's engine, there were games like Duke Nukem 3D and Star Wars Dark Forces that still fell in line with its idiomatic 3D visuals. Was this okay? I think even just looking at the hardware limitations developers faced at the time, it's understandable why so many games ended up so similar to Doom, at least on a presentational basis. Of course, first-person shooter would become the dominant label by the end of the decade, but that generalization doesn't always happen. For a more contemporary example, look no further than Metroidvania, possibly the bluntest name for a video game genre. I think everyone generally understands that having a janky portmanteau of two pre-existing game franchises to describe such a common design ethos isn't great. But despite how common it's become, the Metroidvanias coming out the past decade are still steeped in both halves of that label. Not all Metroidvanias are about shooty guys going through decrepit areas, with progression tracked via color-coded tiles on a grid map, with an oppressive atmosphere hanging in the air. But a lot of them are. The original Axiom Verge wears its old-school Metroid inspirations not on its sleeves, but as a full-body cosplay. It's like the product of a chair-induced timeline divergence, which was handed over to an indie dev to retool into a modern-day release. On the opposite end of the spectrum, you get the officially sanctioned fan game Touhou Luna Nights, where the protagonist with a close relation to a vampire storms through a sprawling mansion in its outskirts. That's pretty Vania, if I've ever seen one. Of course, you've also got games that pick and pull elements from each. Guacamelee is kind of a Metroid, but with a heavier focus on combat, and the Hollow Knight Duology's modular charm system is more reminiscent of a Vania, and despite Cave Story's lack of a fully interconnected map, it is most definitely a Metroid above all else. And then you got the Bloodstained games, which are more or less just Castlevania, minus the trademark and Bram Stoker characters. Actually, the indie spiritual successor to a pre-established franchise is really common, like what Pizza Tower is to Wario Land 4, or Freedom Planet is to 2D Sonic, or City Skylines to SimCity, or Exodiac to Star Fox, or Hytale to Minecraft. And yes, there's even ones that riff off other indie games, like Megabonk's 3D take on Vampire Survivors' roguelike auto-shooter design. Is this all okay? While I can't fully attest to the quality of each game, not having played all the ones mentioned, it's important to recognize the details between the lines, beyond my admittedly deceptive summary of these games in question. Yes, Axiom Verge is like an AU Metroid. Yes, Luna Nights is like Symphony of the Night, if it featured magical girls. And yes, there's a whole bunch of other indies that derive much of their identity from yesteryear's popular titles. But these games aren't deliberately trying to steal their thunder, they're taking them as inspiration to punctuate with stuff from other things, or breaking new ground by introducing entirely original concepts in the mix, the whole cycle of art thing. So, what the hell does any of that have to do with the Bunny Girl Deltarune clone? First off, my video, my rules, but second, I feel it's important to establish a frame of reference, instead of berating this demo for the parts that felt so derivative. In this instance, it's clear that it comes from a place of love for the source material and the fandom surrounding it. But Hellescape isn't an elaborate AU fan take on Toby Fox's work. As stated on the game's FAQ page, if development were to continue, its full version will be a paid release. Given the current state of the game in its demo form, the presentation, the characters, some of the music, and the overall structure, is that ethical? You, the viewer, might even see some of this as a potential breach of copyright law. Whether or not a paid version of Hellescape would face legal ramifications as a result of its derivativeness, in the colloquial sense, I am far from being qualified to comment on, but I can offer up a different perspective, one that may hit a little closer to home. So, I've been in a similar boat before. I know what it's like to have that creative spark after falling in love with certain pieces of media, and unfortunately, I know how it feels to be a Deltarune freak too. Importantly though, whether as a guy making YouTube videos, or as someone trying to put together more ambitious creative projects, the number one challenge I face is figuring out a unique identity for my works. Despite various attempts at broadening the kinds of games I play, music I listen to, shows I watch, or really, just the whole prospect of reading in general, my personal tastes have remained skewed towards media tailored mainly for kids, or whatever else I was exposed to fairly young, which, among other things, is kind of a problem when it comes to creating original art. Sure, I can draw crude doodles of Sonic the Hedgehog until my arms fall off, but being so insular means there's inherently limits to how I'm able to express myself on my own accord. I feel like one of the Homestuck kids who are obsessed with exactly 3 media properties and little else. Don't read too deep into that. I've tried to bring several creative projects to life over the years, and most were just like Hellescape, derivative as hell of the media I liked at the time. After first watching Evangelion, I wanted to do the same kind of storytelling with its young characters under persistent emotional distress, the use of elongated ambient shots, and dramatic title cards for certain dialogue. When I saw a playthrough of DDLC, it made me think of creating a similar ending piano track diegetically weaved into the narrative from a major character's perspective regarding the experiences they'd been through. And after playing the demo for a certain game, it gave me the idea of having a super difficult eccentric boss character accessed through collecting 3 special objects hidden throughout the game world. To an extent, this is completely normal, but I lacked the understanding and means in order to create works that could resonate with others as much as my inspirations did for me while remaining distinct. I still kinda do, but that's just part of the creative process, I think. Likewise, I see something similar going on with Hellescape, that same sort of hyperfixated drive that has continually made myself want to put something out in the world. The one major difference being, well, you can actually play the first 3 hours of Hellescape right now, which, to be clear, is an incredible feat regardless of that demo's contents. Even my various attempts at ROM hacking pre-existing games haven't ever amounted to a finished product that other people could experience. I don't know when the day might come, if at all, but I really want to release a video game at some point. And ironically enough, seeing something as shamelessly derivative as Hellescape's demo, it gives me hope that as a creative, I could get something out there, even if it's not the best or particularly original, as long as I have enough dog to push me forward. In fact, since the start of the year, I've been trying to accustom myself with using the Godot engine, but I'm gonna refrain from giving more details, because I don't want to make any promises I can't keep. Speaking from experience, surprises are always better than learning about a cool thing you'll never get your hands on. And about Toby Fox, the guy whose games I like, your siblings like, your friends like, it's really easy to idolize someone like that. To view the heights he's reached with his works as totally unattainable for a, quote, regular person like you. While you probably won't live a day in Tony's Crocs, it's important to recognize that he's in fact still just a regular guy, even with his lavish gold-plated reptilian-themed footwear afforded by his Undertale money. As you're probably already aware, Toby made ROM hacks too. He also had his own ultra-massive magnum opus project that he barely made any concrete progress on, before shelving to tackle later down the line. We all probably have our own Deltarunes, and figuring out how to best manage such large-scope projects like that can be immensely frustrating if you're unwilling to compromise on any facet. But if you're new to this thing, and especially if you're working on things solo, you have to start from somewhere that isn't drowning in its own ambition. Maybe the stuff you'll make along the way won't be as enriching as Evangelion, maybe it won't be as fun as Elden Ring, maybe it won't be as moving as Mother 3 or Undertale, but it will be your own, even if it doesn't look like much more than the parts which make it up. Because eventually, you might be able to pull through with something truly captivating, whether or not you yourself are satisfied with it. Or so I've heard, anyway. I'm still only partway up the Sisyphean mountain myself. Shit, Hellescape isn't even the only upcoming so-called Underlike. Only around a year ago, a demo was released for the game Misc, where 2 friends travel into a fantastical other world on a quest to save both it and their real world, meeting many quirky characters along the way. While Misc is a side-scrolling action platformer rather than a turn-based RPG, it nonetheless basks in the light of Toby Fox's work with confidence. Yes, that's totally just the Undertale and Deltarune shop menu, which in and of itself is just the shop menu from Brandish 2. Music as well, by the way. Everyone steals. Some thieves' bags merely stick out more than others. And maybe indulging in a bit of thievery isn't the worst. But let's not grow too complacent. There's a difference between how Hellescape handles its inspirations compared to other popular games of its nature, even if it's difficult to place what that is exactly. I don't know to what extent things would need to be changed, but it's hard not to imagine much less than a significant overhaul to Hellescape's structure and world to give it more of its own identity. That said though, there's still quite a few interesting ideas that this project brings to the table, even in its current state. Obviously, a modular system where abilities can be obtained via CDs purchased or hidden in the map isn't the most original concept, but in the context of a non-creature collector RPG, the CDs add a bit of fun sci-fi flavoring to an otherwise standard mechanic. Similarly, getting to learn an overworld move that's not only able to clear the path, but can also tangibly affect certain scenery that would otherwise be completely decorative, is really cool. It serves no gameplay function, but it helps the overworld feel just a bit more alive. All that together with the map naturally looping back in on itself, instead of purely being a linear romp, almost lends a Metroidvania kind of vibe to Hellescape. Hey, who would have guessed that would come up again, huh? If there's anything I'd like to see expanded down the line with this project, it would have to be that. I already briefly alluded to it earlier, but I think the most impactful moment in the demo's story occurs towards the end. In between imitating a chase scene from Deltarune and the final boss following shortly thereafter, there's an entirely unique story sequence set in an ominous darker recolor of the main forested environment, host to a really effectively conveyed plot twist. I can't speak for the 3-minute long flashback that precedes it, or how it ultimately pays off once the main characters confront Ilya, but in that brief moment, it felt like a glimmer of this game's true potential, shining through. I don't say all this because it's relevant. Hellescape's creator, Spoofy Maru, already got feedback about the game's lack of originality a while ago, and its development has been put on hold as a result. This video likely won't be much more than a drop in the bucket for the communities that would, and have already discussed this sort of game. Even if Hellescape remained permanently shelved, something like it is still gonna have an impact on the creator's future endeavors. With big strides come a few missteps here and there, but that's precisely what keeps us moving forward with our creative aspirations, as viscerally corny as that sounds. If nothing else, Spoofy Maru's been a good sport about the criticism towards her demo, even in the face of some genuinely vicious backlash. And even as just a pretty decent demo, that stuff's kinda important to me, and hopefully that can be important to you as well. Get out there and, I don't know, make some stuff with your human hands. As one might say, the world's waiting.